What was interesting to me is that people be talking about crime in Nairobi. Nairobi has a nickname, Nairobi. That's its nickname throughout East Africa, Nairobi. And it seemed like everybody you talk to in East Africa that has been to Nairobi will tell you about how they had their stuff snatched. I'm trying not to curse on here. They had their stuff snatched. And then I looked up the stats. I said, this is interesting. Nairobi has a crime index of 59%, but Kampala got a crime index of 56%. So Kampala not that far behind. Welcome to BLAXIT to Africa. I'm Tadre Delora Moignet, a California native living my best life in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for coming along for the ride. I hope that you are informed, entertained, and inspired to BLAXIT to Africa. Ooh-wee. So the last time I left you, it was round one of Kenya versus Uganda, and Kenya was leading. However, not by much, surprisingly. Kenya was leading in terms of spirituality and infrastructure, and Uganda was leading in terms of economics. And it was a tie in arts, culture, and entertainment, and wildlife. All right, so I stated in round one that there were 11 metrics. I have since added a 12th because how can you discuss a nation without discussing its politics? However, for those of you who are Kenyans watching, Ugandans watching, this episode is really for expats, Africans in the diaspora who are considering making Africa their home. So the metrics are going to be a bit different from those of you who live here, basically. All right, so let's get into it. And if you have not watched round one, I suggest that you do that so that you have a little bit more context. So number 6 on the list is quality of life. In that handicap friendly, neither country is handicap friendly. In the US, we also struggle with that. People who are physically challenged. However, I will say that Nairobi specifically is much better than Kampala, Uganda, when you're thinking about people who have mobility issues. My mother is in a wheelchair, and I'm always thinking about where can I take her that will accommodate her. And there aren't many places. Gay-friendly, alternative lifestyles, neither country. Neither country. I think in Uganda, homosexuality is just straight up illegal. However, in Kenya, it's not illegal, but then sodomy is illegal. I'm not a part of that community, so I can't give you the inside scoop. However, I do recall being in Kampala, and there were frequent raids of gay clubs and bars, etc. I'm gonna just leave that there. Senior friendly, I'm gonna go with Kenya, because if you have a parent or if you yourself are in need of assisted living, Kenya will facilitate that much better than Uganda. There are, in Nairobi specifically, a couple of really good senior living facilities. Also, you're able to hire nurses who can live in your home and assist you. And the nurses here are a bit more trained in terms of dealing with issues like dementia. I offered a consultation to a gentleman who was from Northern California, African American, and he really enjoyed going for his walks. And one of the things that he said is that he wanted to be able to go for his walks without tripping and falling in potholes, and that there was, ample sidewalks. And I feel that Kenya is much better for that. You can be in a gated community in Nairobi, outside of Nairobi, and experience that. You can be in Nairobi and just, do your laps on the sidewalk. It's an older gentleman that lives on my block, and I'm always seeing him doing his laps around the block. So I'm gonna go with Kenya on that one. Although I would say within both cultures or within both countries, there is so much respect for elders that is really lacking in the, I would say, in the Americas and Western Europe. Dating life. Watch my first video with Brittany Caldwell where we discuss this in depth. I have been out of the dating scene for real, for a long time. So I really don't know what's happening. However, I see that from coast to coast, from continent to continent, folks is complaining. But if you want to know about dating specifically in East Africa, check out my first video with Brittany Caldwell. Teen friendly, I'm going to go with Kenya just because there's so much for teens to do for them to get into. And there's lots of homeschooling communities, because sending your kid to an international school in East Africa is pricey. Thousands of dollars annually per head. Like, and is it worth it? And is it worth it is the question. Child friendly, I'm going to go with Kenya as well, only because there are so many activities for children to get into, young children, older children, toddlers, etc. Midlife friendly, I'm going to go with Kenya. Although I was pleasantly surprised that Uganda has a lot of old head spots. You know what I'm saying? You don't walk into a spot and feel like you out of place because you're the oldest person up in there. However, Kenya just has more. Nairobi has more, and it's just commonplace to see older people, middle-aged people just out and enjoying life. And one of the things that used to throw me for a loop in Uganda was that you would go out and you would see all these fine, you know, silver foxes, you know, in a grown man era with the beards and whatnot. And 80% of them was married. Where was their wives at? It's really not socially acceptable for Ugandan wives to just be out chilling with their husbands and crew. Not so much in Kenya. Air quality. We gonna go with Kenya, boo. Ooh, child. The I gotta take a sip of tea for this one. The air quality in Kampala is bad. I can't even front. Uganda has the 18th worst air quality in the world, which equates to a 2.16 loss of life expectancy. The quality of air we breathe is important. Kenya has the 47th worst air quality with a 1.24 loss of life expectancy. And I would go out on a limb and say that once you leave Nairobi, the air quality significantly increases. One of the cool things about Nairobi is that it has urban green spaces. It's going to clean that air for us. Those trees, the oldest land organisms on the planet, so important. They're going to clean that air for us. Uganda and Kenya are very green countries. However, they are cutting down those forests in Uganda like nobody's business. And I don't know specifically why the air quality in Kampala is so bad, but yo, it's bad. Okay, now racism. I think I did a video about living life without racism. And we know that anti-Blackness exists everywhere. However, you can mitigate it by being in Africa, by being in a place where you're not othered and you look around and everybody look like you. That's important. However, with that said, you're unable to escape racism completely. So here in East Africa, there's Black versus white, there's Black versus Indian, there's also Black versus Arab. And when it comes to Black versus white, I will say that there's definitely more racism in Uganda. I feel like you feel it more because it's a smaller country and you're just more likely to bump into white people in Kampala unless you work in those spaces, which will usually be in the NGO sector and the diplomatic sector. Black versus Indian. Ooh, that's a toss-up because I've experienced really egregious racism from Indians in Uganda and in Kenya. However, I feel like the Indian population in Nairobi specifically is more sophisticated, much more, maybe even more well-traveled and exposed. And so you're not getting this backlash that goes back to centuries. Black versus Arab, I haven't really experienced so much of it in Kenya and Uganda. I definitely have experienced it in Tanzania, where, you know, Arabs are just like, I'm doing you a favor by renting my house to you. That type of, yes. It can be tricky. So overall, the country that I feel has less racism, Kenya. Patriarchy. Kenya is winning. Kenya is winning when it comes to the least amount of patriarchy. If you happen to get into the algorithm of the Kenyan social media algorithm, you'll see that throughout East Africa, there is this conversation and narrative about Kenyan women being the most unruly, the least willing to be subservient. And I'm not in people's homes like that, so I really don't know what goes on behind closed doors. However, I thought it would be interesting to look at divorce rates and maybe go from there. So, Uganda surprisingly has higher divorce rates than Kenya. Kenya's at 1% and Uganda's at 7%. So one of the things about many ethnic groups in Uganda is that women and children are required to kneel before men in greeting. And I do know for a fact that if your husband is out in these streets, the expectation is that you're supposed to wait up until he gets home and then have a hot plate of food waiting for him and not ask him no questions. And I remember one of my Ugandan neighbors just telling me, you know, you're supposed to be a man's peace. You need to be a man's peace. You can't stress a man. And I'm looking at her life and I'm like, okay, so your man has effectively abandoned you. He's made all these promises. He's barely even paying for your baby's education. I don't know how much being a man's peace is really paying off for folks. So then I thought it'd be cool to look at gender-based violence. Okay, in terms of gender-based violence, Kenya is winning. There's less of it in Kenya. Oof. According to the National Survey on Violence in Uganda, it reported that 95% of Ugandan women had experienced physical and/or sexual violence. These stats go back to 2021. And in Kenya, 34% of women have experienced physical violence since age 15, and 13% of women have experienced sexual violence at some point in their lives. Those stats are from 2022. Statistics are interesting because every org is going to report or measure differently. However, the statistics are troubling. So if we're going to look at gender-based violence, I'm going to say that Kenya is leading in terms of there's just less of that here, reportedly. Medical care, Kenya wins. There's just better hospitals here. I'm not going to speak on medical professionals because they need to be supported with tools and admin and equipment, etc. However, I do know for a fact that moneyed Ugandans will come to Kenya for medical treatments, if not South Africa, if not Europe, if not India. And I don't know of any Kenyans that are going to Uganda for medical treatments. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it's more likely to be Ugandans coming to Kenya for medical treatment. Fertility centers, there are more in Kenya. Dental care, definitely better in Kenya. I've experienced Ugandan dental care. I've experienced Kenyan dental care, and I'll just say it's better here. Now we come to politics. Ooh, let me take another sip of tea. All right, I have had the good fortune of being in both Kenya and Uganda during their presidential elections. What I can tell you about Uganda is that Museveni has been president since 1986. 38 years. My homie, who was 32 at the time, he was like, I'm 32 years old. I've only known one president. On the books, Uganda is a democracy. Technically, you can go to the polls to vote. However, I was told that folks was getting beaten at the polls. So most Ugandans did not go to the polls to vote. And I also saw a lot of hyper-policing and police brutality for those who were supporting Bobby Wine, who was the top presidential rival. Additionally, during the elections, our internet was cut completely. I believe for about 4 days, we just ain't had no internet, like none. And that was designed to prevent people from reporting what was happening. I didn't understand it because, like, once you turn that internet back on, Museveni's still gonna be the president. So then, when they turned it back on, they turned it on to a trickle so that you really could only read, look at photos. Like, just if it was somebody posted a carousel, you could probably only see 1 or 2 photos of the carousel on Instagram. No videos, like it wasn't enough speed or power, whatever the terminology is, to see videos, post videos. It was a mess. Now, I was also here when Ruto was elected. I stayed my ass in the house because I was advised to, just like I was advised in Uganda. And I live in an apartment complex, so I could see that even Kenyans was staying in the house. The previous elections apparently were very violent, and folks were just being preemptive and cautionary and staying indoors. And I do know that some folks did go to the polls. I'm not sure on the percentage. However, just based on that little information, I will say that Kenya is winning. I will be transparent and say that I'm not clocking nobody's politics for my mental health. I intentionally don't watch the news for my mental health. However, certain things will come up on my timeline and I'm forced to pay attention. We just had a series of protests. Gen Z taken to the streets, letting the government know they're not having it. I think that protests are a healthy mark of a progressive democracy. Education, baby, it's a tie. And I myself was shocked. I see why Gen Z was protesting, and you will see too. Secondary education, Uganda is winning. 26% of Ugandans finished their secondary education, where 24.5% of Kenyans do. In terms of collegiate education, Ugandans are winning. I was surprised, with 5% of Ugandans enrolling in collegiate education and 3.5% of Kenyans enrolling in collegiate education. Compared to the United States, I believe about 30% of Americans have a college degree. But, you know, we have to pay attention to the wording, right? Because this is enrolled in, this is not completing. Literacy rates, Kenya is winning with 83% of Kenyans literate and 81% of Ugandans being literate. Bookstores, I threw that in there because I think it's a good marker of education, how many bookstores exist within a place, and Kenya's winning. Ooh, the Pan-African bookstores here, Cheche Books, someone know me, like, love, love, love them. And there's so many more that I have not visited, that I cannot remember their names. However, when I was in Uganda about 3 years ago, there weren't many bookstores outside of textbooks. And then you have these bookstores that are mainly textbooks, and then they like have a small fiction, nonfiction section. Fitness, Kenya is winning, have to say. Now, when you think about Kenya and Uganda, you have to understand that agriculture is a major, if not the most important sector in these countries. So folks farming, they getting that exercise. However, for those of us living in cities who are sedentary, who work at desks, who eat copious amounts of meat, we need gyms. We need to move our bodies to be healthy. And I found that the gyms, like the gyms that I would want to go to, there was just a couple, and their memberships were pricey as AF. Pricey AF. Like, you talking about $300 a month for a gym membership, which, you know, in the US, you go to Planet Fitness, you got a gym membership for $10 a month, $20 a month. Yeah. In Nairobi, you have so many gyms, and they're nice. Like, I have 2 gyms on my street. So, and they're not as expensive. Like, you can definitely pay. You know, I think the nicest gym that I've seen is at Westgate. I believe it's like $99 a month. However, when it comes to fitness here, like taking aerial yoga, something unique like Pilates, Vinyasa, you can pay a pretty penny. Like, for me to take as many Pilates classes as I want would probably be about $300 a month. My Afro Beats dance class with the best dance teacher in Kenya, that's like $10 a class, which is not bad. But if you're not making USD like that, that's a stretch. To be doing that once a week, twice a week, it's a stretch. I will also say that you're more prone to see Kenyans out and about, I'll just say Nairobians, out and about exercising, running, walking in Karura Forest, in the Arboretum. And it's easier to find workout clothing here. Like, when I was in Uganda, there was one place that I found, and it wasn't really good quality in terms of new workout clothing. There were a couple of places in Kampala that had secondhand workout clothing. New, you would have to go to Adidas, as we say in the US. Their merchandise was 3 times as much as you would pay for it in the US because of duties, customs, and fees, and it was old stock. Yeah, but in Nairobi, you can find new workout gear relatively easy. All right, y'all, let's talk about the crime. What was interesting to me is that people be talking about crime in Nairobi. Nairobi has a nickname, Nairobi. That's its nickname throughout East Africa, Nairobi. And it seemed like everybody you talk to in East Africa that has been to Nairobi will tell you about how they had their stuff snatched. I'm trying not to curse on here. They had their stuff snatched. And then I looked up the stats. I said, this is interesting. Nairobi has a crime index of 59%, but Kampala got a crime index of 56%. So Kampala not that far behind, okay? The safety index is higher in Kampala, just slightly, where 44% of people say that they feel safe in Kampala versus 41% of people that say they feel safe in Nairobi. This is from Numbeo, and it's an index for 2024, for the start of 2024. I'm going to tell you like this. If you don't like cities, do not come to Nairobi. Do not come to Kampala. One of my clients, my expat consulting clients, she grew up in small towns and moved to Nairobi, and Nairobi was just overwhelming for her. And so now she's moved to the suburbs. In the suburbs, she's just like, I might just move further away from the city to have the security that I feel, the lifestyle that feels comfortable for me. And I wholeheartedly support that. I'm a city girl. I grew up in the city. So everywhere I go, I'm like this. Don't come here with your guard down. You have to be on high alert in damn near every city I've ever been to. The other thing about these two places, Nairobi and Kampala, you can't get no phone on credit like you can in the US. So folks is snatching phones. You can't just walk down the street and film yourself and film people. And no, you can't be in your car on your phone with the windows rolled down. That's a no. So when it comes to crime, Uganda is winning with the least amount of crime, but only slightly. Oh my God, did I make it through the whole, I made it through so quickly. All right now. So here we go. Round 1, Kenya was winning. Round 2, Kenya is also winning. Are y'all surprised? Is Auntie tripping? I really try to balance my personal experience with the stats. All right. So let me just go through real quick. Kenya wins 6-2. Kenya wins in fitness, senior care, medical care, quality of life, spirituality, infrastructure, and politics. Uganda wins in crime and economics. There's a tie, in my opinion, in terms of wildlife, arts, culture, and entertainment, and education. I'm thinking about patriarchy. We know, like anti-blackness, that patriarchy is everywhere to varying degrees. One of the things that I can say that I've experienced in Uganda, more so than Kenya, is just men taking up a lot of space. That boy child is prioritized in the womb, okay? And even with lots of awareness and education and self-reflecting, whew, men in Uganda just feel like I should be first in every goddamn thing. And the way they move through the world, it's just like you as a woman need to move out the way. I could be in line at the cash register and a man will just come up and just like put their stuff right there and expect to be served before me, even though I'm currently being served. And because it's ingrained in the society, nobody's questioning it. The cashier doesn't tell the man, sir, just wait your turn. I'm helping someone right now. Please wait. No. That's not happening. That used to blow me. And I wasn't always in the mood to check folks. But when I was, it was just like, okay, she's obviously not from here. And so boom. I just have so many stories of that where I'm just like, who is this person? Like, why is this person more important than me? Are they a famous politician? A famous businessman? What is it? Also doubling back, thinking about racism, which is a psychosis. Increasingly, there's more of that, Black versus Chinese, because there's more Chinese in East Africa. And I had to check this woman last week because it was the same sort of thing where it's just like, I'm literally at the register. The man is ringing me up. This woman comes. She was Asian. I'm going to assume she was Chinese. And she puts her stuff down and pushes my stuff along. On the conveyor belt, do you know? I had to tell her that she needed to wait. And then she just got her stuff, picked her stuff up and moved to another aisle. I've experienced this in Uganda as well. Hey. I really don't even have any advice at this point. I will just say that it exists and I only expect it to get worse unless the government starts tossing people out, just like Kagame did in Rwanda. Ooh, just keep your wits about you. And I also want to say that I am open to feedback, and I want to know from y'all, do y'all really think I'm tripping with these stats? With my perception? Or am I really, really on point? All right, boo. So which country is going to be right for you? Let me just say that I offer BLAXIT consultations. It's really a 1 hour organic conversation in which we discuss what you're looking for, what you want, what nations would be right for you, what resources you need, and I leave you with a document full of resources, full of organizations and people that you can count on to help you have a soft landing. Having lived in both countries, Uganda and Kenya, specifically in their capital cities, Kampala, Uganda, and Nairobi, Kenya, as we know, life outside of major cities is drastically different. However, I will say that what I miss the most about my life in Uganda is the pace of life and the people. Ugandans are just really friendly people, very open people. You could go anywhere in Uganda and make friends. You know, if you're somebody that really wants to slow down, then Kampala might be a good fit for you. Because my girlfriends could call me up same day and boom, I'm finna meet you over here. It's finna be a group of us. We gonna kiki it up. We gonna have us a good time. In Kenya, we need at least, I'll say in Nairobi, sorry. In Nairobi, we need at least like a week to get together with our folks because the pace of life is just so fast. And it's reminiscent of my life in LA where we needed a month in advance to have a group get together. I mean, more than 2 people? Oh, we're talking about months in advance. So that is really what I miss about my life in Kampala. Now, I met an American woman who is fluent in Kiswahili, and she lives in Kampala. And I asked her, like, you're fluent in Kiswahili. Most people don't speak Kiswahili in Uganda. You know, you have a talent management business where most of your artists are in Kenya. I was like, why aren't you in Nairobi? Why do you stay in Kampala? And she said, because I like having relationships with people. I like my life in Kampala where I can connect with people easier and people are open. Basically the same thing that I'm saying. And she comes to Nairobi frequently for business, but for her, home is in Kampala. And I also just want to put out there, because I know not everybody watching is of African descent. She is of European descent and she's living her best life. So I leave you with that. Based on what I shared, what do you think? Is Kenya or Uganda a better fit for Africans in the diaspora? Thank you for joining me on this episode of BLAXIT to Africa. If you like what you heard, please share, subscribe, and leave a comment. May you thrive. May you be inspired. May you move with love and intention. Until next time.